Right now, one Democratic member of Congress is moving closer to a run for governor of Georgia. We're going to hear what the head of the state's Republicans thinks about the move. Also, we're going to break down a flurry of activity today under the Gold Dome for Crossover Day. And we'll examine a rare neurological disorder and the fight to have it recognized right here in the state. This is The Take. Let's get it. Hello and welcome. I'm Chesley McNeil, and this is The Take, where we go above and beyond the headlines and look at the why and how stories are impacting you and your community. We invite experts in. They have all the expertise. They give us their take on the today's top stories as well. We're going to start off today with a look ahead to 2026. Yep, Georgia Congresswoman Lucy McBath may be looking for a new title in a little less than 2 years. Yesterday, the four-term representative and prominent gun control advocate filed paperwork allowing her to now raise money for a run for governor. Here to talk more about that move is the chair of the Republican Party, Josh McCoon. Welcome to the show, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, first let's get your take on this potential move, this entry for the race. What do you think?
Well, I think we were all anticipating that Congresswoman McBath would get in the race for governor. I believe the Democrats are going to have a pretty crowded primary field since it appears that Stacey Abrams is going to take a pass and not run for a third consecutive time. But Congresswoman McBath is going to have the same problem most of the leading Democratic candidates will have, which is a public, very far left voting record, which we will be able to expose. Most Georgians are center-right folks. They're common sense people. They like the direction of Georgia government. If you look at the approval ratings of Brian Kemp, right track, wrong track polling, the state's on the right track, and she's going to have, I think, a difficult mountain to climb to make that case if she becomes a Democrat's nominee.
Gotcha. You said it was going to be a crowded race amongst the Democrats. Do you think she's the best Democrat to run?
I mean, from a Republican perspective, I would not be too upset if she was the nominee for the general election because, again, there's a very far left voting record there. The kind of Democrat that I think makes it a more competitive election is someone that's more in the middle, and those Democrats are in short supply in Georgia, at least people that are currently in elected office. So, we'll see who all gets in, but I expect it'll be several. From my perspective, again, we're not concerned. We'll run a very competitive general election campaign if it is Congresswoman McBath.
You mentioned some of the weaknesses. What about some of her strengths? Do you think she has some strengths that maybe will challenge you?
So, of course, her district has been changed a couple of times due to redistricting. Mm-hmm. So she's represented a significant number of Georgians. So that gives her a leg up on the average member of Congress. There are more Georgians that know her mm-hmm. than would know an average member of Congress. And, of course, she's had an 8-year tenure. She's well known, particularly on the gun control issue, has something of a national profile, would probably be able to raise money outside of the state. So, again, not saying she's not a formidable politician, but once again, I think that we'll be able to highlight her voting record in Congress that's just out of step with most Georgians.
Gotcha. Let's look at your party for a minute here. You got one candidate running, Attorney General Chris Carr. How do you think he stacks up against McBath?
Well, look, Attorney General Carr has a distinguished record of service over the last 10 years. Again, someone who I think can carry that banner for Georgia Republicans and will be a formidable candidate if he's our nominee. I do think, like the Democrats, we will have several people that enter into the race. It's still pretty early, so I don't know who our nominee will be, but I think we're going to have several great Georgia Republicans for our primary voters to choose from.
Who else do you see getting into the race on the Republican side?
I think when the legislative session adjourns, I would be surprised if Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones did not run. Obviously, Lieutenant Governor Jones is very close with President Trump. President Trump endorsed him for Lieutenant Governor 4 years ago. And he's a statewide elected official as well, so has a network around the state. So I think he's definitely a candidate. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger has been mentioned as a possible candidate. And then, of course, you may have some surprises out there. We had David Perdue about a decade ago come out of nowhere to become a U.S. Senator, had not previously been in elected office. So you can't discount that we won't have an entrepreneur or businessman or businesswoman who chooses to get into the race as well.
How do you think the race here for governor will stack up like nationwide? Do you think a lot of eyes will be on our race?
Absolutely. Georgia will once again, really for the fourth consecutive election cycle, be at the center of the national conversation, not only because we'll have an open governor's race in a state that is a swing state and a competitive state, but we have for us as Georgia Republicans the best opportunity to pick up a United States Senate seat by firing John Ossoff. So you will see a lot of money coming into Georgia. There will be a lot of eyes on Georgia. Once again, we will be at the center of the national political conversation.
Okay. All right. Georgia Republican Party Chair Josh McCoon, thanks for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a great day. All right. Some of the other headlines that we're tracking for you today. A man is recovering in the hospital this morning after suffering burns in an overnight house fire. There were a dozen units called or responded to this Decatur address, and they tell us the home is a total loss. We're also told that the fire started in the garage. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. We are working to learn the severity of the man's injuries. Today, Governor Kemp will sign the 2025 state budget. It includes $1 billion for your one-time tax rebate of $250 per person or $500 per married couple. It also funds ongoing relief from Hurricane Helene and an additional $1.5 billion towards pre-K through 12th grade education, including money for teachers. Waste Brothers in Doraville Division is hosting a hiring event. They will be looking for CDL drivers and helpers. You must have your resume, a motor vehicle record, a medical card, and a driver's license. All CDL drivers are asked to wear boots for a road test. The hiring event will take place at Waste Pro's Doraville office. Interviews will be from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. All right, take a look at our 7-day outlook. And yeah, it's cold. It was cold out there this morning, folks, and temperatures will be below average for today. You're looking at 55 degrees for the afternoon high today. We're going to rebound quickly, though, so if we can get through today, and all we have to do is get through today, we'll see those temperatures heating back up into the 60s, right around 67 degrees on your Friday. Saturday will be the same, but we will have some clouds around. It won't be the prettiest looking start to the weekend. On the back half of the weekend, Sunday, a cold front will come through, bringing us rain, 40% chance for a few scattered showers, but will also lower that temperature a bit, back down into the 50s for highs on Sunday. We have the Hunger Run Walk going on, so if you're coming out to see us, make sure you bundle up for that. 65 degrees on Monday, maybe a lingering sprinkle or two in the morning. We'll clear it out by the afternoon, and then those 70s will return by the time we hit midweek. Don't go anywhere. We're back right after this. All right, after doubling down on tariffs, President Trump is now easing back a little bit for automakers, giving the big three a 1-month exemption. Joining us now is NBC Washington correspondent Alice Barr, who's been covering politics for years now. And Allison, I'm noticing a theme here. Where the president will give an order and then kind of eases back on it a little bit before going full on. And now he's doing it again with the automakers here. What's your take on this?
Yeah, so in this instance, we're seeing that the White House announced a pause on the 25% tariffs for cars and auto ports that are being imported from Mexico and Canada. And that came after hearing directly from the big three automakers. But it's important to know it's just a 1-month exemption before President Trump wants reciprocal tariffs on a much broader swath of virtually all U.S. trading partners to kick in. So that's that kind of one step forward, one step back, and then maybe a leap forward in this instance. A lot of American businesses are bracing for a potential blow of having to absorb those increased costs on materials that they may import from other countries and then potentially having to pass those costs along to customers. That's where U.S. consumers are going to start to feel the impact as well, though President Trump has been adamant that any short-term pain will be worth what he sees as long-term gains for the U.S. economy. We will see. You know, every day it seems like something new, and we're just getting word now that Trump is expected to sign an order dismantling the Department of Education. What can you tell us about that? Yeah, so this is something that comes from the Wall Street Journal, reporting that President Trump is expected to issue an executive order aimed at eliminating the Department of Education, and that could happen as soon as today. NBC News has not viewed the draft order. The Journal cited people briefed on the matter as saying it could be signed as soon as today. However, President Trump cannot unilaterally abolish a federal agency without the approval of Congress. Worth noting that the new Education Secretary, newly confirmed Linda McMahon, earlier this week put out a message to employees within the Department of Education describing what she called as the final mission of the Education Department, using that term multiple times, final mission, as she talked about cutting bureaucracy, red tape, and really starkly trimming down. President Trump had said throughout the campaign trail that he wanted to see the education department go away, and he wanted to see education decisions go back to the states, though this is a massive undertaking for any state to try to take on, to fund education at a statewide level. It'll be interesting to see where that goes from here.
Absolutely. So it's going to take some time. So we'll be hearing more about that, I'm sure. The Supreme Court ruled that Trump's administration must pay $2 billion to an agency responsible for administering humanitarian aid around the world. How big of that is a blow to Doge and Elon Musk?
Yeah, so this is a legal setback. It's interesting that it came from the Supreme Court, that in itself, which is a conservative-leaning court, and two of the conservative justices, Chief Justice John Roberts, as well as Amy Coney Barrett, who was appointed by President Trump, sided with the liberal justices in rejecting the Trump administration's bid to freeze $2 billion in foreign aid payments to USAID contractors for work that had already been done. It came at the same time that a federal civil service board ordered the Department of Agriculture to temporarily reinstate more than 5,000 fired probationary employees. These are both, discrete instances of judges or of the Civil Service Board going against the Trump administration. What could have a bigger impact is if some of those decisions wind up being more of a precedent that then go over to affect what's happening in other agencies, or could be used to try to overturn some of the other steps that the Department of Government Efficiency has taken as well.
Okay, all right. You also have some news on the foreign policy front regarding the war in Gaza and Ukraine. What can you tell us?
Yeah, the administration is engaging in direct talks with Hamas over the release of U.S. hostages still being held in the Gaza Strip. That's according to the White House press secretary. It's a marked change. It's the first time the U.S. has held direct talks with the group, which is designated a terrorist organization. Typically, U.S. doesn't negotiate with terrorists, but saying in this case a hostage negotiator is the one that's carrying that out. And at the same time, on Ukraine, the Trump administration has paused intelligence sharing that helps Ukraine anticipate Russian attacks. It comes after a pause in military aid following that Oval Office clash with Ukraine's president, but it may be short-lived. The administration officials signaling that they're happy to see Ukrainian President Zelensky saying he wants to resume peace negotiations and sign that mineral deal.
All right. NBC's Alice Barr, always appreciate your insight. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks.
All right. It will be a busy day at the state capitol as many bills will move from one chamber to another chamber. Yeah, big crossover day. Zach Merchant, co-host of Georgia Vote and member of the 11Alive political team, joins us now. And Zach, big day at the Capitol. What are you watching for?
It is a big day at the Capitol. You've probably heard this phrase a lot over the past few days as we've been getting close to this point. Now it's here. It's crossover day. It is the critical midpoint of the legislative session, and it can have a big impact on what bills eventually become law. And we'll dive into all that in a moment. But first, let's talk about what's happening right now. And I'm looking at the clock here. In just about exactly 15 minutes, Governor Brian Kemp is expected to sign House Bill 67 into law, and that will amend the state budget.
All right. So what's on that bill?
Yeah, so right off the bat, we should be clear, this is a series of amendments to the already in place budget that runs through the 2025 fiscal year that goes into the fall. The legislature, they have not yet passed the budget bill for next year. And look, we're talking about the budget, we're talking about complex stuff here, but a release from the governor's office highlights some of the biggest takeaways, and one of the biggest, the amended budget will designate funds for ongoing relief efforts in Georgia communities impacted by Hurricane Helene. And Chesley, I remember this. I know you do too. We were both here all night covering that storm as it rolled into Georgia. It brought enormous damage to some parts of our state in the south and in the east, and in some places they're still working to fully recover.
Wow. Yeah, I had a conference down in Valdosta that got canceled because of that, and they're still trying to recover down there. So I know what you're talking about there. What else could we expect in the bill?
Well, another big highlight in the amended budget that's about to be signed, and like we said, about 14 minutes now, it includes funding for increased security efforts inside the Georgia Department of Corrections, and that comes following years of reporting from us and from many other news outlets across Georgia on the dangerous conditions inside the state prison system. Also in the bill, what the governor's office calls, and I'm quoting here, record amounts of school safety investments. And that, of course, is just coming less than half a year after that deadly attack we all remember at Appalachia High School.
Yeah, that makes some sense right there. All right, so that's the budget signing. What else happens on crossover day? What other bills may we see get crossed over, maybe even make it through?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's worth kind of talking about what is crossover day too. It's the midpoint of the legislative session. It's also the day when bills must be passed out of the chamber where they were introduced and cross over into the other chamber in order to still have a chance to eventually be passed into law later in the session. And there are caveats to that, of course. There are technical maneuvers you can use as a legislator to get around that later. No bill, as it is said often, is truly fully dead until the session is over. But generally speaking, if your bill does not cross over by the end of the day today, its odds of becoming law, they get much, much, much lower. So if you're somebody who's sponsored a bill as a legislator, if you're a lobbyist who's supporting a bill, you have an interest in one of these, and it hasn't crossed over yet today, there's going to be a lot of action, a lot of pressure to get it done today.
What's the big bill that you're looking for today? What you're keeping a close eye on?
One of the very biggest ones, and it's a good question, Chesley, one of the very biggest, it's a bill that could open the door to possibly legalizing sports gambling in Georgia. And I see you nodding your head there. You remember this. Everybody who's watching would know. It is a topic that you've probably heard about before because it has been before the legislature again and again and again in recent years, and it's never quite managed to get enough support to be signed into law. And this year, though, some lawmakers, they are once again trying to change that. Their bill introduced into the House of Representatives late last month. As of this morning, though, it has not yet crossed over. I will be watching closely to see what happens with it as the next, 12 plus hours go by today.
Is there anything else you're tracking?
Another big topic to keep an eye on, of course, is school safety, specifically Senate Bill 17. If it is passed, it would require local school systems to implement a mobile panic alert system that could connect different first responding agencies to help them coordinate in case of an emergency. It would also give the Georgia Emergency Management Agency increased abilities to help facilitate that coordination between agencies. And obviously this is in response in large part, but not entirely, of course, but in large part in response to the attacks at Appalachia High School late last year. And the bill has not yet passed out of the Senate, but we will, of course, be watching very closely to see if that changes today.
All right, sounds good. Zach Merchant always keeping us abreast of what's going on, especially under that gold dome, man. We'll be inviting you back to get more. You can watch the Georgia Vote with Zach and Faith Jesse Sunday mornings at 11 right here on 11Alive. Plus, we'll have more stories for you coming up. This is The Take. We're back right after this. Severe anxiety, rage, insomnia. Kids in Georgia are suffering from a rare neurological disorder, but for years, nobody believed them. That's about to change now as groundbreaking legislation is finally recognizing what families have known for years. Caitlin Ross joins us now. Take a look behind the scenes at a fight to get PANS and PANDAS recognized here in the state. And Caitlin, let's start off right at the bat. What is PANS and PANDAS?
It's a rare neurological disorder that stands for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorders associated with streptococcal infections. It's as hard as it is to say as it is to treat. But basically, it's an infection like strep throat that tricks a child's immune system into attacking the brain.
All right, so what does this look like for the kids?
So that's a great question because it can look different for every child, but it could mean rage, OCD, insomnia, food restrictions, a lot of anxiety. I talked to one mother, Heather Ward, about what it was like for her family before her son was diagnosed.
Antipsychotics, he was on ADHD meds, he was suicidal at 8, like it was just, we just couldn't figure it out. And the doctor who figured it out was the doctor who had been handling his ADHD meds for a couple of years. And he said, hey, I want you to go to this website. And we looked at the symptoms and I was like, he has every single symptom.
Wow, that sounds pretty scary, Caitlin. What can parents do about this?
So there are some treatments available. The first is antibiotics. That helps kick the infection out. The second is much more serious. It's called IVIG, and it's basically using other people's antibodies through an IV to try and restart the immune system of a child that's affected. But it's $13,000 per treatment. A lot of times insurance doesn't cover it, and most families just cannot afford it.
I got super mad, and I was like, I'm ready to fight. I'm gonna fight because my kid deserves this treatment. We deserve to get a chance at being a normal family and her having a normal childhood. And so, it really, but it's exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting. You know, when you are fighting a multi-billion-dollar system, you feel very small.
So are there any solutions here at all, Caitlin?
Yes, Chesley. A new bill was just introduced that passed the State House unanimously. It would provide some insurance coverage for treatments, but then it would also recognize PANS and PANDAS as conditions, really giving parents some teeth for what they've been saying for years, that my kid is sick and my kid needs help. The bill does have some limitations. It covers some treatments, but it doesn't cover that IVIG we were talking about, that super expensive treatment. But parents say, listen, at least this is a start. It will give families somewhere to go. But time is of the essence. The Senate hasn't heard the bill, and crossover day is today. So families are going to be at the state capitol rallying, really trying to get support for that bill and hoping that Governor Kemp sends it into law. The second is that Children's Healthcare of Atlanta just opened a clinic this year. They are taking time with the launch. This is a complicated diagnosis and a complicated treatment, so they can't do it really fast. But 5 patients who have PANS or PANDAS have been scheduled at the clinic, and they've already seen 3 children. Families are really hopeful that that's going to give them a way to heal. But as many as 1 in 200 kids could have this condition. So for these families, ramping up that treatment is vital.
Where can parents go to get the support?
There is a network right here in Georgia. It's called the Southeast PANS Network, and that's so helpful for families who are looking for their next steps. It's an advocacy group that's been working for 8 years to try and get recognition of this condition. So hearing this bill today at the Capitol is a huge step. There's also a national network of families that rally together to help people figure out where to go next. Because if your doctor says we can't figure out what's wrong with your kid, we don't know what to do, this advocacy group can really help provide a roadmap for families who are struggling.
PANS and PANDAS, Caitlin. Now we know. Now we know. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate
Thank you.
You can watch Caitlin's full story tonight on 11 Live News at 11 and right here on 11 Live Plus. All right, back with my final take. You're watching The Take. We're back right after this. All right, head outside of Savannah and you'll see that True Miller Bacon still got game. Miss Bacon turned 100 years young last week, but that hasn't kept her from her weekly bowling league in Hinesville. Thanks to her 75 average, she's helped her team win league titles here in recent years. She's also been known to bowl well above her average. Last year, her high score was 106. Wow, look at her. Oh yeah, well focused. All right, time for my final take. Take a look at this. Yep. It's a flaming hot Cheeto believed to be shaped in the form of Pokemon character Charizard. The Cheeto was nicknamed Cheetozar and sold last week at auction for $87,000. $87,000. Bidding started at $250. What are we doing? $87,000? What are you going to do with it? You can't eat it. You're going to display it in your house and say, hey, look at my $87,000 flaming hot Cheeto? Come on, y'all. I'll tell you what, let's take $20, get 5 bags of Cheetos, throw them out on the table, and let's find a shape and see if we can get $87,000 for it. What are we doing? As we say goodbye today, we're going to close with your moment of Zen. Hopefully it's worth more than $87,000. Enjoy.